Dear students, today we discuss about the pollination in plants. The pollination means the transfer of pollen grains from anther to stigma of the same flower or the different flowers of the same plant or the different plants. The pollen, on the basis of the pollen, the pollination is of three types: the autogamy, geitonogamy, and genogamy. The autogamy, in this type of pollination, the pollen grains transfer from anther to the stigma of the same flower. This is a kind of self-pollination. And in this type of flowers, the male reproductive part and the female reproductive part remains in close contact with one another. The clistogamous flower and chasmogamous flower, both flowers facilitate this type of pollination. In clistogamous flower, the flower do not expose. The anthers and stigma remains closed within petals, and in these flowers the self-pollination is assured and no need of pollinating agents. The chasmogamous flowers are those flowers whose the reproductive part exposed, and in these flowers, if the male and female reproductive part are in close contact, then they also self-pollinated or show autogamy. Some flowers, some plants like oxalis, viola, and commelina have both type of flowers, clistogamous flowers as well as chasmogamous flowers. Now we study the clistogamous flower, the geitonogamy. In this type of pollination, the pollen grain transfer from anther to the stigma of the another flowers. Actually, it is cross pollination, but the pollen and stigma are of the same plant, so genetically these flowers are similar. So this type of pollination is also a self-pollination. In this type of pollination includes like the cucurbits and maize. The genogamy, in which the pollination takes place from anther to stigma of the different flowers of different plants, and actually it is a cross pollination. Now, on the basis of pollinating agent, the cross pollination may be of two types. The pollinating agent may be abiotic or biotic. When the abiotic agents are like wind and flowing water, and the biotic agent may be animals. The abiotic agent like moving air or wind help in pollination, and flowing water also help in pollination. The pollination by wind is called as anemophily, and the flowers of these plants are colorless, odorless, and nectarless. They produces an abundant amount of pollen grains, and pollen grains are very light and non-sticky. Now we study the pollination by water. The pollination by water is called as hydrophily, and in this the water current help in pollination. The flowers of this plant are also colorless, odorless, and nectarless. The pollen grains are ribbon-like and in some cases protected by mucilaginous layer. Some plants grow in water, but they produces the bright colored flower, and from above the surface of water. So these plants pollinate with the help of insects, not by water, like the water hyacinth, water lily, and lotus. In these plants, the pollination takes place by insects. The pollination by water takes place in like Zostera, Vallisneria, and Hydrilla. Now we study the pollination by animals. The pollination by animals in different flowers, the different agent like insects, birds, bats, etc. help in pollination. First of all, we study the pollination by insects. The pollination by insects are called as entomophily, and the flowers of these plants are bright colored, nectarous, and odorous. Most of the plant is pollinated by insects like the yucca, the fig, and most of other flowers provide a special type of structures which facilitate in pollination. The pollination by birds, is called as ornithophily, and these flowers are large in size and produces a lot of nectar in watery form, and they do not produce odor. The petals of these flowers form a bell-like structure or tube-like structure which help the birds for sucking of nectar. Pollination by bats. In some plants, the pollination may also take place by bats. The flower of these plants are also large in size and produces a large number of nectar. The pollination by bats is called as chiropterophily. The example of this type of pollination is Adansonia and Kadam, etc. Thank you.